Hello students, welcome to this lecture for the first chapter in the Lifetime Wellness course. My name is Matthew Ruiz and I am a professor here in the Department of Kinesiology, and I'm going to walk you through chapter 1 here of Lifetime Wellness. Tell you everything that you need to know to get you started here with this class. So what we're going to talk about here in this chapter is understanding why this is important. We're going to look at some of how much you should exercise, how much physical activity you should get each week. We're going to talk a little bit about the definitions. What is the difference between exercise and physical activity and some of their specific components, things like that. Help you to understand why you should have a program like this and why you will be doing some of the activities that you'll be doing throughout this course. Briefly going to touch on some of the motivation that it takes and some of the behavior change that you need in order to successfully navigate your way through a physical activity program. That would include things like goal setting using the SMART paradigm, and then we will end very briefly on some medical clearance stuff. So let's get started. So this book starts out by talking to you about lifestyle, and being that when it comes to quality of life and how you would rate your quality of life, the way that you choose to live your lifestyle plays a very important role in that. And what we know is that with most lifestyles, particularly in Western cultures, you simply don't get enough physical activity to maintain good health. Diet would be another problem in there also, and diet and exercise are not good. The human body does not function as well as it can. And because of these poor lifestyle patterns, things like being sedentary or eating a poor diet will help to increase and to speed up how quickly your body breaks down. And the simple truth of the matter is, because of everything we see in the media and magazines, it's just a bunch of rumors and myths on how to lose weight or how to be more fit. And the simple truth is most of us just don't know how to actually implement a program that is going to work. And that's some of the stuff that we're going to talk about throughout this course and give you ways to develop a program that actually works. We also know that physical inactivity, being sedentary, is a serious threat to health. In fact, it turns out that being sedentary is more detrimental to your health than smoking cigarettes. You heard me right. It's actually healthier to smoke cigarettes than it is to be sedentary. We actually have a name for this now, and it's called sedentary death syndrome, or SEDS. And this is probably the second greatest threat to public health right now. And there are several things that impact health negatively, one of which is our technology. Think about how much time you spend in front of a computer, at a desk, in a chair, on a computer, or on a device of some sort. Nutrition, although we have, at least in America, more food than we have ever had before, our nutrition is worse than it has ever been. Stress is a big problem also, and we will talk about that in future chapters. And then also environmental factors, such as going to college. A big change in your environment can lead to a negative impact on health if you are not prepared for that. The things that kill us now are not the things that killed us 100 years ago. 100 years ago, it would be things like chickenpox or polio or measles that would kill us. Now, what kills us are things that are called chronic diseases, also known as hypokinetic diseases. And chronic diseases, chronic just means over a long period of time. So it's not like you just wake up obese or wake up with heart disease one morning. That develops over time, and that is a chronic disease. And the things that kill us now are all chronic diseases. Things like hypertension, which is just another name for high blood pressure. Heart disease, the #1 killer in America. There are several different types of heart disease. We also call that cardiovascular disease, CVD. Diabetes tends to go along with that, type 1 and type 2. Type 2 is the one that's more lifestyle dependent. One that you may be experiencing already from sitting in front of a chair or a TV or sitting in a desk for too often, but chronic low back pain. And then also one of the biggest epidemics in America right now is obesity. And so what we know is that all of the leading causes of death in our country and most developed nations are all lifestyle related. And what that means is since they are lifestyle related, you can change those. Here's a nice chart of the leading causes of death. You see cardiovascular disease up there at 30%. Cancer is big. Those are the two biggest ones. And then a bunch of things make up the other. So those are things that are most likely to kill you. This is in our book also if you want to look at that a little bit more closely. Despite how unhealthy we are, we're actually living longer than we ever have before. In fact, the average life expectancy is between 77 and 81 years, almost 82 for women. Women always live a little bit longer than men on average. But how does that compare to other places in the world? Is that good? Is that bad? Well, it turns out that in the countries in the world, we rank 33rd in life expectancy. Japan has the #1, the longest life expectancy. And there are several factors for that. Why are we 33rd? Have the biggest economy, have the most money, all that stuff. Why is our life expectancy 33rd in the world? Here are some reasons why. Some of our minority groups, particularly Native Americans, rural African Americans, inner city poor, have very, very poor health. There's lots of reasons why that happens. Some of that is political, some of that is social, some of that is cultural. We're not going to get into the whys of that in this class, but just be aware that there are some groups, and these are usually poverty type groups, that have very, very, very poor health. There's also high levels of violence, particularly homicides in our country, and physical activity trends also tend to be moving in the wrong direction. Here's a quick chart of life expectancy. You see us there at the 5th one down, Japan at #1 down there at the very bottom. I would not worry about memorizing the specific numbers of all of these. Just kind of understand where the United States ranks relative to some of these other places. We also know that, or scientists predict that over the next handful of years, our lifespan may actually decrease. And one of the reasons is because obesity tends to go up. One of the big take-home numbers that you should remember for this class and apply to your life is that 2/3, 66% of all Americans are either overweight or obese. 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese. It says a lot about our health and the direction that we're trending in. There's no evidence that that number is slowing down or will shrink anytime soon. And what is more, it's not just obesity, but it's the other things that are linked to obesity also. With obesity, if you are obese and as you grow older, you tend to get some of these other issues too. Things like type 2 diabetes, different types of heart disease, angina being one of those, and then high blood pressure. These all tend to kind of come together as comorbidities, we would call it. So because of that, because there is such a prevalence of obesity, we really need to be aware of our physical activity and how much we are exercising. In fact, people who are not physically active, those who are sedentary, and there are some definitions of how much you need to get, and we'll get into that in a minute, but what we know is just regular moderate physical activity will give substantial benefits to health and well-being. Well, what is regular and what is moderate? We'll get into that also, but just as kind of a preview, moderate doesn't have to be any more than a nice brisk walk. That would count as a moderate physical activity. It's not like we're telling people to go out and run marathons or to be in the gym 3 hours a day or something like that. If you're not physically active, just get up and move, and that is going to help out with your health and your well-being. If you already are moderately active, if you're someone who exercises or gets physical activity 4 or 5 days a week or more, then what we know is there are cumulative effects, meaning that more is better. The more fit you are, the greater the health benefits. Obviously, there's a cap at the top, and you just can't keep exercising forever and get more and more healthy. But for the most part, unless you're taking it to extremes, the more you exercise, the more fit that you're going to be. Poor health is a public health problem. It puts a strain on the economy because doctor bills go up, insurance goes up, all those sorts of things are stressed and taxing the system. Uh, and what we know on the opposite side is there are several benefits of participating in regular physical activity, such as, here are just a few. This is just a highlight, just a few of the benefits. But reducing mortality, that means death, reducing dying early so that you can live to the full length of time that you are supposed to with your life expectancy, and reducing risk for many of diseases. So not only do you live longer, you live healthier while you're living longer. Also gives you healthy bones, muscles, and joints. And then there's a big psychological component. Things like mood improves. Your ability to do schoolwork improves. Creativity, all those sorts of things improve the more you engage in physical activity. From a societal standpoint and from a personal standpoint, your healthcare costs go down. Many insurance companies even give breaks and incentives and decrease costs if you are more healthy, and improves QOL, or quality of life, as you age, which is a very important marker as you get older. So here are some definitions, and it's very important to be able to distinguish when we talk about physical activity and we talk about exercise. Those are two different things. And here's the definition. These are things that you should certainly be aware of and remember. Just commit these definitions to memory. First, when we talk about exercise, this is a type of physical activity. So all exercise is a physical activity, but not all physical activity is exercise. Okay? So the definition of exercise is something that is planned, structured, and repetitive. Excuse me. So you think of going out and going for a run. That is planned, that is structured, and the movements are very repetitive. So typically we think of cardiovascular stuff. You may think of weight room stuff and lifting weights. It all falls under that, planned, structured, and repetitive. It can also be more loose too. Most sports would fall under this category of exercise. The motivation and the purpose is also what helps to define and distinguish exercise from physical activity. Exercise is repetitive bodily movement with the intent to either improve or maintain physical fitness. And we'll define physical fitness here in a little bit. This is different than physical activity. Physical activity is simply any movement produced by the body. So when you walk from the science building from McFarland over to the SAC, you are doing physical activity. When you walk up the steps in high-rise, you are doing physical activity simply because you are moving. That does not count as exercise. Both are beneficial, but they're not the same thing. Physical activity, just like exercise, does require energy. Energy is still burnt, and it does produce progressive health benefits over time. If you were to walk back and forth between McFarland and the SAC multiple times throughout the day, eventually that's going to improve your health. And if you do that on a regular, planned, structured, or repetitive way, then it's no longer, or it's still physical activity, but it falls under then exercise. So exercise is planned, structured, and repetitive with the purpose of trying to improve or maintain physical fitness. Physical activity is simply moving in any way, moving your body. A couple of other quick things, what we call NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And this is just energy that you expend, so you are burning calories, doing things that are not related to exercise. And here's the definition of moderate physical activity. So this is another very important one for you to kind of understand. This is activity that requires burning 150 calories per day or 1,000 calories per week. So if you're doing that, then you're doing moderate physical activity. You can bet if you're walking around campus throughout your day, you're probably getting to that within a week and engaging in moderate physical activity. Again, not exercise, but physical activity. So how much should we get? There are some federal guidelines. There are very smart and very important people that determine how much we should get, and this is kind of where we fall. So for us, this age group of 18 to 64, who are considered adults, not children, not elderly, in that the most healthy and longest part of your life. Kind of the definition is you want to get 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity aerobic activity on most days of the week. Okay, you want to engage in something, try to do something most days of the week that total up to 150 minutes per week at the moderate. Or you can do 75 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic activity. Now, what's the difference between moderate and vigorous? It's exactly what it sounds. Vigorous, your heart rate gets up much higher. So you think of now, instead of just going for a brisk walk, now you're jogging. Maybe you're sprinting. A lot of weightlifting activities are going to be vigorous in nature. A lot of sports are going to be vigorous in nature. So you don't have to do as much of those. And this is a minimum, by the way. This 150 minutes of moderate activity per week, that is an absolute bare minimum level of activity in order to accrue health benefits. More is better. We'll get into some of those too here shortly. You should also do muscle strengthening exercises 2 or more days per week. And that becomes more important as you get older. For older adults, 65 plus, based on your abilities and health, and continue to do the same thing. Children over the age of 6 need to get 60 minutes per day. So they actually need even more than what adults do. So a couple of other special groups, pregnant and postpartum women, you can see that there. And in order to achieve a caloric balance, and weight loss or weight gain is very simple. If you eat more calories than you burn, you're going to gain weight. If you burn more calories than you eat, you're going to lose weight. If you take in the exact same, if you eat the same number of calories that you burn, you're going to remain the same. So if you're actually trying to lose weight or to maintain that caloric balance, you need 150 minutes. And if you are trying to lose weight, you probably need to up that. All that indicates is that you have to burn more than you eat. So the best plan actually, and we'll get into this in future chapters, is to eat a few less calories, burn a few more calories, and kind of do it that way. If you are trying to lose weight, though, as a lot of people are, when 2/3 of our population is overweight or obese, a lot of people are trying to lose weight. It's the #1 New Year's resolution every year. You probably need to do 60 to 90 minutes of activity every day in order to prevent regaining the weight and in order to lose weight. Take a look at that chart. Feel free to pause the video if you want to study it a little bit closer, but I'm going to skip through it here. Same thing with this one. You can take a look at that and study that a little bit closer if you want. And one more here, changes in mortality rates. So back to vigorous activity for just a moment. So a lot of this stuff we measure in what's called a MET, which is a metabolic equivalent. A MET of 1 would be probably what you're doing right now, just sitting doing nothing. So you can kind of see how things get more difficult. Vigorous activity by definition is a MET of 6 or higher. So it'd be an activity that is 6 times more difficult than what you are doing as you're sitting right now. And those METs can go up quite a bit higher than that. But that's one way we kind of measure. The other way we measure vigorous activity is with heart rate, and heart rate needs to be substantially higher than what it would be when you're resting, probably above 85% of your max heart rate. A quick number to get your max heart rate would be 220 minus your age. So if you're a 20-year-old, which is a good number to take, your max heart rate is 200. 85% of that would be 170. So vigorous activity would be any activity that gets your heart rate up over 170 beats per minute. Or you can use the MET equivalent also. More vigorous activity is associated with greater longevity, meaning you live longer, and also is best for improving your aerobic capacity, your ability to run or swim or bike or something like that. You have to do vigorous activity in order to do that. This is something that's very much for healthy people. The other very popular way to do vigorous activity are through things like P90X or Insanity, Zumba, different things like that are also be considered vigorous. A lot of CrossFit would fall under the category of vigorous activity. Those are for healthy people. If you are not healthy, then you do not want to start with vigorous activity. You want to start with moderate activity and work your way into vigorous type things. So what are some of the benefits? An acute benefit is something that happens immediately. And one of the biggest things is you burn more calories, and those could last up to 72 hours. And a very popular doctor from Stanford said people should think of exercise as a medication and take it on a daily basis. So the more so than immediate benefits, though, are the long-term things, those chronic benefits. And there are many, many of those. And the biggest of which, the very last point there, is helping to prevent chronic diseases, things like cardiovascular disease, cancers, high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, all those things. You help prevent that, which it ultimately helps you from dying early and dying painfully. So at the end of the day, though, what we're looking for with a physically fit person is someone that can meet ordinary and unusual demands of daily life in safe and effective kind of ways. So being able to do what you need to do in order to be successful, being able to walk across campus, being able to climb the steps of high-rise, those sort. If you're an athlete, then obviously your level of fitness needs to be much higher based on the demands of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So without being overly fatigued and still being able to have time to do the things that you enjoy doing with your friends, that sort of stuff. There are two types of physical fitness: health-related, which is for everybody; skill-related, also called performance-related, which are more for athletes. And so for a general fitness program, we really want to focus on our health-related components. And you will see these throughout the semester. When we do our fitness assessments, we will hit each of these and just kind of highlight those here. A lot of books will put these into 5 different categories. This one does it in 4. Cardiorespiratory, also called cardiovascular endurance, has to do with heart rate. That's the most important one up till the age of 60. Muscular fitness, which is the one that usually broken into 2. You have 2 components of that: muscular strength and muscular endurance. We will actually be testing muscular endurance, although if you know muscular endurance, you can estimate muscular strength. So you can think of muscular fitness as one, or break that into 2 different things. Body composition, which is literally how much fat do you have on your body, and then flexibility, how flexible are you. So those are the health-related components. Everybody, regardless of whether you're an athlete or not, needs to have some level of each of these, or have to be in acceptable kind of levels in order to be healthy. Now, if you're more athletic, if you're on a sports team, something like that, then there are other pieces also: agility, coordination, speed, balance, reaction time, power. Those are words we associate with sports. They're not the ones that we are particularly interested in this class. However, we're going to focus on the health-related, but do be aware that there are skill-related fitness components out there as well. Another definition: wellness. You're in lifetime wellness. What does that mean? One of the bedrocks of wellness is that being healthy is more than just not being diseased. It's much more broad than that. So being fit alone, being physically fit alone, does not necessarily decrease your risk for disease. So wellness looks at something that is much more all-inclusive and includes more than just health-related things. So, and really is interested in 2 primary things with wellness. How do we improve your QOL, quality of life, and also economic progress, which we're not particularly interested in this class. Most books break this into 7, and this book uses 7 dimensions of wellness, and you can see each of those. Obviously, our class is going to focus mostly on the physical side. Lipscomb does a good job of trying to build the spiritual side, but you see the other dimensions of wellness. And what this chart kind of tells you is that all 7 of these play into your overall quality of life. If you are not satisfied with your occupation, most of you are students now, but when you get out into your jobs and have careers, if you are not satisfied with your occupation, that decreases your overall sense of wellness. Environment down there at the bottom. If you live in a highly polluted, highly noisy, you have to sit in traffic every day, those sorts of things, then your environmental wellness is not going to be good, and it's going to affect your overall wellness. And each of those will be affected as well. All of those play into each other. So be aware of those different dimensions of wellness also. So as we kind of work through this class, we're going to look at several different things and guidelines on how you maintain a program that you can do for the rest of your life. How can you be healthy from here forward, and what are some things that you can do? Do you need medical clearance? That's an easy one. We'll look at that very, very briefly. Assessing your overall level. Where are you at now? How fit are you now? And we will test that in this class. We'll test it again at the end of the semester. So what type of programs do you need? Prescription, you think of doctors prescribing medicine. What do you need to do in order to be more physically fit? Behavior modification stuff, which we're going to look at next. We're going to look a little bit at diet and weight control programs. Those are chapters in this book also, so we'll see that in the future. Healthy lifestyle stuff, and then looking, discerning myths from facts. A lot of the things in the book try to break that down. Our area has a lot of myths, and trying to separate those from fact. So a lot of this comes down to how do you change your behavior? And because exercise, fitness, good dietary habits, those are behaviors, and all behaviors are learned, right? And so whatever behaviors you have now, if your lifestyle is very sedentary, that was a learned behavior. So we need to learn, how do we change that behavior? And we frame that under this word behavior, or this term behavior modification. So how do we create permanent changes from negative behaviors into more positive behaviors that will ultimately lead you to better health and better well-being? One thing, and take this to the bank, change is hard. People do not like to change. We are very set in our ways, and we do not like to change. So behavior modification can be very, very difficult. We know from a social psychology kind of standpoint that when people are rewarded, either through feedback or physical kind of rewards, or even mental rewards, people tend to pursue change a little bit more. And people contemplate change if it is being influenced by what their core values. If you do not value health highly, if being fit is not a high priority for you, then changing your behavior from sedentary to active will be very, very difficult. So it's also, there are some values that are based in these. So be aware of that also, and really think critically about what some of your core values are and how health kind of plays into that a little bit. So you can take a look at this chart, and this is kind of the typical exercise dropout cycle. What we know from lots of research is that 50% of all people who begin an exercise program drop out in the first 6 months. So only half people who start exercise actually stick with it for more than 6 months. And you can kind of see how that works here in this cycle. So a little bit about values. Values are people's core beliefs and ideals, and we learn those through several different ways: experience, role models, different things like that. And your values ultimately govern your behavior. So again, if exercise, if fitness, if health is not valued highly, then your behavior is going to be very difficult to change. And values tend to shift as people shift. As you mature and have new priorities and things, think of getting married or having kids, the things that you value change. And that's just a natural part of life. So being active can lead to better behaviors and change some of those values. Particularly as you get older, that may become a more important value for you. So a couple things about your brain and habitual type behaviors. So we carry out familiar cues. We don't even realize it. Behavior is fairly automated. We don't think a lot about our behavior. There's actually a part of the brain, you can see it there, the corpus stratum, that plays this role in habit formation. Your brain likes habits. So in changing an unwanted habit / creating a new habit is very difficult. Why? Because you have programmed your brain to do this habit, whether it's good or bad. So unprogramming your brain can be very, very difficult. And there are 3 ways here that kind of mention, the book talks about these. Some of that is recognizing stress and different things like that. So, but this is very, very difficult to do. So sometimes changing those core values will overrule instant rewards. You think of eating an extra piece of cake or something like that. If your new core value is, I want to be healthy, then you stop after 1 piece. You do not have a second piece. Although that instant reward of having a second piece of cake is really, really enticing. But you don't do that. There are other parts of the brain that help to overrule this, the prefrontal cortex in particular. So as you develop new behaviors, you recognize some ways that your body changes, the way that you think about stuff, and all those kind of things. So willpower is another piece of this, and that's self-restraint. We think in terms of food and not taking that extra piece of cake, that sort of thing. But that's built slowly. And what we do know is that exercise can help increase willpower, as can having a good balanced nutrition, getting good sleep, all kinds of things. Be aware of this too. As stress kind of starts to creep in, that willpower will decrease during times of depression, anxiety, anger, loneliness. All things, maybe not at a clinical level, we're not talking necessarily clinical depression or clinical anxiety, but all things that college students will face. And think about how your willpower to be healthy may decrease. Be aware of that. Motivation is very important. If you are not motivated, you're not going to do it. Motivation is simply the desire to do something. So the best motivation comes from inside, but it certainly can be triggered by outside factors. We can get people to run 5Ks simply by offering them a t-shirt. It's very much an external motivator, that sort of thing. Another kind of psychological topic is locus of control. And this is just, to what extent do you believe that you can influence the world around you? And this is seen as either internal and external. It's on a continuum. So you got external on one side, internal on the other. And how much do you control it? If you control it, if you influence what's going on in the world around you, then you have an internal locus of control. If you just feel that you're being tossed around by the wind and the waves of life, then that would be an external locus of control. Ways to take action, you can kind of see these again. You may want to stop and pause the video to write these down if you want. I just want to skip forward to the next piece here on changing behavior. So the first thing is recognizing you have a problem. Could be that you're not healthy. Could be that you need to lose weight. Could be that you want to get more fit. Could be that you want to eat better. All those sorts of things. But recognizing something needs to change. And then you start the process. And there are different steps. One, stopping a negative behavior, easier said than done. Preventing relapse. And you can't just stop a behavior. It has to be replaced with something else. So identifying and developing a positive behavior in order to take the place of that poor one. Strengthening it and then ultimately maintaining it over time. Again, all of that is much easier said than done. The book breaks those down a little bit more thoroughly. So please feel free to take a look at that in the book. Probably the best way that the best theory or the best model and how we change behavior is called the trans-theoretical model. This is very, very in-depth. We're just going to put these stages up here and take a look at it in the book. The first stage, though, is called pre-contemplation, and these are people who are not even aware that they need to change and thus are unwilling to change behavior. The second stage is called contemplation, and these people, if you're in this stage, you're considering making a change within the next 6 months. So maybe you've decided, yeah, I want to get active, I want to lose weight, whatever, but I'm not going to do it here anytime soon. Sometime in the next 6 months I'll do that. The preparation stage is third, and these are people who maybe have gone out and bought a pair of shoes or have gotten a membership at the gym. They plan on making changes very, very soon. Then you move into the action stage, and now you're actually doing it. So now you are active. Now you are eating better, those sort of things. The key to this one is that you've been doing it for less than 6 months. Relapse is very common. Dropout is very common in this stage. If you can make it 6 months, then you move on to the maintenance stage. And you're in this stage anywhere from 6 months to 5 years. If you can maintain a healthy behavior for up to 5 years, then you move on to the termination stage and relapse back to a previous thing, barring any unforeseen injury or illness. Relapse is very, very low. So, and then that undesirable behavior has been eliminated. So, if you do it for more than 5 years, you have adopted that new behavior. The trans-theoretical model was originally done for smoking cessation, so you can probably see how that would work for this, but it works really, really well for positive behavior changes, such as physical fitness, eating well, that sort of thing, too. The book also talks about the processes, which is another part of the trans-theoretical model, and how we change. It lists several of those things, so feel free to take a look at these to get a little bit more in-depth kind of understanding of these. But things like self-analysis, probably the single most important thing is understanding yourself, being self-aware of your weaknesses, your strengths, all those sorts of things. Having a positive outlook, knowing that you can accomplish what it is that you want to accomplish, being committed to it. Hopefully we can help you with that throughout this course. Environmental control, surrounding yourself with people who are working towards the same goals, being mindful, analyzing your behavior when it's poor, setting goals, which we'll look at briefly here in just a second also. There are other kind of things too, such as, again, surrounding yourself with people, having helpful relationships, maybe distancing yourself from people who are reinforcing old bad habits, countering, which is kind of mentally changing the conversation in your head, monitoring, and then giving yourself rewards also. So finally in this chapter, the last thing it talks about are SMART goals. And you've probably seen this, but an action plan is only as successful as the goals that kind of go along with it. If you want to change your behavior, you have to have a plan. SMART goals is a pretty popular way to kind of do that. And this is all that SMART goals are. A goal has to be specific, has to be measurable, it has to be acceptable. In other words, sometimes for A is action-oriented. Has to be realistic and has to be time specific. If your goal is those 5 things, you're much more likely to be able to accomplish whatever that goal happens to be. When you do goal setting, you should periodically evaluate those goals to make sure you're on your way. You will have setbacks, and that's okay. You change your goals, you learn from them, and keep just kind of self-correcting. And then once you have achieved a goal, then you set a new one that's even more challenging than the one before. Last thing, beginning exercise. So if you are a person who is not apparently healthy, if you have a history of problems, then you should be screened either by a physician or at least by using something like the PAR-Q, which is in our book. It's an activity 1.2. If you answer yes in any of those, then you should seek a physician's approval before engaging in an exercise program. Typically, people who are 18 to 21 years old typically do not have to worry about this. As you age, it becomes much more important, but do be aware that, that this is out there. All right, guys, we made it through this first chapter, so I appreciate you listening to it. If you need to go back and review, please do, because there will be questions on the exam that come from the presentation. But thank you for your time, and good luck.